Have you ever heard the expression that learning floats on a sea of talk? This is a line that my colleague Amanda Potts mentioned about a month ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. And I realized that a lot of the work she does in terms of creating spaces for productive and rich and authentic discussions with her students is inspired by this notion that we can actually teach grammar and syntax through small group and whole class discussions, and that speaking is really not disconnected from learning to read and learning to write. So today I want to talk a little bit about how we can embed syntactic patterns in students' minds through talk. We often maybe isolate the reading from the writing and both of those pieces from speaking, but we can actually integrate grammar and syntax using sentence stems and also structured group discussions in order to really integrate those syntactic patterns into students' minds. And if we're able to do this through those productive conversations and those talks, and students really understand sentence stems and how to use them and different sentence patterns, then those will translate not only to their writing, but to their understanding of a text. Because often students might not be able to understand a text not only because they don't have enough background knowledge or because of decoding, but looking at larger units of meaning within a text, like a sentence or a paragraph. So one strategy to embed syntax into conversations and discussions in small groups or whole class discussions is to ask students to simply use sentence stems when they're responding orally to a question. And so a very simple way of doing this is drawing on Natalie Wexler and Judith Hochman's The Writing Revolution, and using an activity that they call Because But So. And in this activity, you present students with a sentence stem. So science is important because, and they have to finish the sentence, or science is important but, science is important so. And so by practicing this orally before they start writing responses to those questions, again, and if using it consistently, it's really helping to embed those patterns into students' minds so that they're able to translate that to writing and also to reading. And obviously you can scaffold to create more complex sentences, the integration of different sentence patterns. Another way to support students' understanding of syntax and sentence patterns and structures is to try Amanda Potts's conversation game. So this conversation game is really an organized way of having a structured discussion, and it embeds the rich, authentic talk into the structure of that discussion. And so for this game, you print out sentence stems and you cut them up, and you can print each type of sentence stem on a different color of paper if you want to get fancy, and then provide each group with some of each of these types. And then you can provide students with prompts to answer. And so I'll just take you here to the conversation game. You can have a look at it. So the conversation game has sentence stems for expressing opinion, for agreement, for agree and add, for disagreement, asking a probing question, asking a clarifying question. And so you can also go to the New York Times Learning Network if you're looking for some prompts for students to respond to in those discussions using the sentence stems. Should athletes speak out on social and political issues? Should all young people learn how to invest in stock market? Anyway, there's a huge list on the New York Times Learning Network to prompt some very interesting and rich discussions. The last strategy that I'm going to provide today is actually drawing on Matt Arkay's Not Light But Fire. And this is a book where he really promotes kind of a dialogic approach to education. And one of the activities he suggests is an activity called Build on a Classmate's Point. And so for this activity, as students would be engaging in a whole class discussion, the teacher would be writing the thread of the conversation on the board to illustrate how students are building on each other's points and ideas. So Joe said, which inspired Mike to tell his story, which Maria thought reminded her of. So after students have a short conversation, as a teacher, you would write those that conversation, the skeleton of it on the board. And then you might discuss some transition words or phrases that could be used to connect the students' ideas. And so once you've done that a couple of times after students' discussions, then you can create with the students an anchor chart of transitional phrases and use each discussion as an opportunity to practice them. And so students, again, are able to practice transitional words through an oral discussion or conversation, and that will become embedded, these kind of transitional words and phrases, and be able to translate to their writing and also to understanding different ways of transitioning from ideas in writing when they're reading it as well. So that was just a quick overview of how learning can float on a sea of talk, and the importance of really embedding some of those strategies to class discussions in order to support students' reading and writing.